Tensions boiled over as Karen from the HOA stormed up to Jason's truck, her eyes blazing with fury. "You have 1 hour to move this monstrosity, or I'm calling the authorities," she spat. Little did she know, this was no ordinary vehicle. It was a fully equipped city rescue rig, and the fate of a missing child hung in the balance. With time running out, Jason had to make an impossible choice: obey the HOA's petty rules or race against the clock to save a life. This was a battle of wills that would shake the very foundation of the neighborhood. Jason gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white as he stared at the imposing figure of Karen, the HOA president, standing in front of his truck. He had just returned from a grueling 12-hour shift responding to emergency calls, and the last thing he needed was another confrontation with the neighborhood's self-appointed enforcer of order. "Karen, this is an authorized city vehicle. I can't just move it on your whim," he said, trying to keep his voice even. "I don't care what it is," Karen snapped, her manicured fingers pointing an accusatory finger at the truck. "It's an eyesore, and it violates our HOA regulations. You have 1 hour to get it off the street, or I'll have it towed." Jason felt a surge of frustration. He had lived in this neighborhood for years, and he took pride in maintaining his property and following the rules. But when it came to his work, he couldn't just bend to the will of an overbearing HOA president. "Look, Karen, I understand your concerns, but this truck is essential equipment for my job as a first responder. I need to keep it here in case I get an emergency call." Karen's eyes narrowed, and her lips curled into a sneer. "First responder, huh? That's a convenient excuse. I've seen you use this truck for personal errands. It's time you started respecting our community guidelines like everyone else." Jason opened his mouth to protest, but at that moment, his radio crackled to life. "All units, we have a report of a missing child in the Oakwood neighborhood. Repeat, a missing child. All available units, please respond immediately." Jason's heart raced as he listened to the urgent call. Without a second thought, he started the engine and began to pull out of his driveway. "Hey, where do you think you're going?" Karen shouted, stepping in front of the truck. "There's a missing child, Karen," Jason said, his voice laced with urgency. "I have to go. Lives are at stake." Karen hesitated, her expression shifting from anger to uncertainty. But the rules?" "Sorry, Karen, but this is more important than your petty rules," Jason said, gently but firmly pushing the truck forward, forcing Karen to step aside. As he sped away, Jason couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. He knew he was about to break the HOA's regulations, but in this moment, the safety of a child was all that mattered. He just hoped that Karen would understand the gravity of the situation and let him do his job. Jason's truck sped through the neighborhood, siren blaring and lights flashing. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, his mind racing as he tried to piece together the limited information he had received. A missing child in Oakwood. That could mean anywhere in the sprawling community. He needed to act fast, but the sudden confrontation with Karen had thrown him off balance. He hoped the HOA president would understand the gravity of the situation and not try to interfere further. As he reached the edge of the neighborhood, Jason spotted a group of frantic parents gathered on the sidewalk, their expressions twisted with worry. He pulled the truck to a stop and jumped out, his rescue gear already in hand. "What's the situation?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm and reassuring. A middle-aged woman, her eyes red from crying, stepped forward. "My son, Timmy, he was playing in the backyard and then he just disappeared. We've been searching for over an hour, but there's no sign of him." Jason felt a surge of adrenaline. Every minute counted in a case like this. "Okay, ma'am, try to stay calm. I'm going to need you to gather the other parents and have them search the immediate area. I'll coordinate with the police and dispatch additional units." The woman nodded shakily, turning to the others and relaying Jason's instructions. Jason quickly radioed the dispatch, requesting backup and an all-points bulletin for the missing child. As the other parents fanned out, Jason began a systematic search of the surrounding streets and yards. He scanned the area, his eyes peeled for any sign of the boy. The knowledge that a child's life hung in the balance filled him with a sense of urgency and determination. Suddenly, a movement in the bushes caught his eye. Jason rushed over, his heart pounding. "Timmy, Timmy, is that you?" A small, trembling figure emerged, eyes wide with fear. "Mister, I'm scared," the boy whimpered. I got lost." Jason felt a wave of relief wash over him. "It's okay, Timmy. I'm here to help. Let's get you back to your parents, okay?" As he gently guided the boy toward the waiting parents, Jason couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. He had left the confrontation with Karen unresolved, and he knew that the HOA president would not be pleased. But in that moment, the safety of the child had been his only priority. As Jason approached the relieved parents, he saw Karen standing nearby, her arms folded across her chest. Her expression was a mixture of anger and confusion, and Jason knew he was in for another confrontation. "There you are. I should have known you'd disobey the rules and rush off," Karen spat, her eyes narrowing. Jason took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Karen, a child was missing. I had to respond. It's my job as a first responder." "Your job?" Karen scoffed. "Don't give me that nonsense. You're just using it as an excuse to do whatever you want." "Well, I won't stand for it. That truck is gone by the end of the day, or I'll make sure you lose your job." The parents, who had been hugging and comforting Timmy, turned to look at the heated exchange, their expressions uneasy. Jason felt his frustration rising, but he knew he couldn't let it get the better of him. "Karen, you don't understand. This truck is essential equipment for my work. If I had ignored the call, that child could have been in serious danger." "I don't care," Karen snapped. "The rules apply to everyone, regardless of your so-called job. You're just another resident of this neighborhood, and you will follow the same guidelines as the rest of us." The parents glanced at each other, unsure of how to intervene. Jason could see the concern in their eyes, and he knew he had to find a way to defuse the situation. "Look, Karen, I know you're upset, but can we discuss this later? Right now, I need to make sure Timmy is safe and get him back home." Karen opened her mouth to argue, but before she could speak, Timmy's mother stepped forward. "Excuse me, but I think we all owe this man a debt of gratitude," she said, her voice firm. "He found my son when we were all worried sick. If it weren't for him, who knows what might have happened." Karen's expression faltered, and for a moment, Jason saw a glimpse of uncertainty in her eyes. But just as quickly, her anger returned. "That may be true, but he still broke the rules, and I won't let him get away with it," she said, her voice dripping with determination. Jason knew he couldn't reason with Karen in this state. He nodded to the parents and gently guided Timmy toward the waiting police officers, silently hoping that the HOA president would come to her senses. As Jason watched the police officers reunite Timmy with his relieved parents, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had been gnawing at him since his confrontation with Karen. He knew he had done the right thing by responding to the emergency call, but the HOA president's stubborn refusal to see reason was a troubling sign of things to come. With a sigh, Jason turned his attention back to the situation at hand. He approached the officers and provided a detailed account of the events, ensuring that the necessary paperwork and reports were in order. The police thanked him for his quick action and prompt response, acknowledging that his presence had been instrumental in the safe return of the missing child. As Jason was about to head back to his truck, he noticed Karen lingering nearby, her brow furrowed in thought. He hesitated, unsure of whether to approach her or simply leave the situation as it was. But something inside him compelled him to at least try to reason with her one more time. "Karen," he said, keeping his tone calm and measured, "I know you're upset about the truck, but you have to understand that my job as a first responder is to save lives. I couldn't just ignore that call, no matter what the HOA rules say. Karen's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Jason thought she was going to launch into another tirade. But instead, she let out a long, frustrated sigh. I know that, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But the rules are the rules, Jason. We all have to follow them, even you. Jason felt a surge of empathy. He could see the conflict in Karen's expression, the struggle between her sense of duty to the HOA and her recognition of the importance of his work. I understand that, Karen, he said, his voice gentle. But sometimes, the rules have to bend a little when lives are at stake. Surely you can see that, can't you? Karen was silent for a long moment, her gaze drifting to the gathered crowd of parents and police officers. Jason could almost see the gears turning in her mind as she wrestled with the implications of his words. Finally, she looked back at him, her expression softening ever so slightly. I'll think about it, she said, her voice hesitant. But don't think this means I'm going to let you off the hook, Jason. The truck still needs to go. With that, she turned and strode away, leaving Jason uncertain of what the future held. But he couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope that perhaps, just maybe, he had planted a seed of understanding in the stubborn HOA president's mind. As the days passed, Jason found himself caught in a tense standoff with Karen and the HOA. Despite his efforts to reason with her, the president remained adamant that the rescue truck be removed from the neighborhood. Jason knew he couldn't simply comply with her demands. The truck was essential to his work as a first responder, and he couldn't afford to lose it. But the constant threat of having it towed weighed heavily on his mind. One evening, as Jason was finishing up his shift, his radio crackled to life once more. All units, we have a report of a major car accident on Main Street. Multiple injuries, possible entrapment. Dispatching all available units. Jason's heart raced as he jumped into the truck and sped towards the scene. As he maneuvered through the busy streets, he couldn't help but worry about what Karen might do in his absence. Arriving at the accident, Jason sprang into action, working alongside his fellow first responders to stabilize the victims and extricate them from the twisted metal. The scene was chaotic, but Jason's training and experience allowed him to remain calm and focused. After what felt like an eternity, the last of the injured had been transported to the hospital, and Jason began the process of securing the scene and completing his reports. As he was preparing to leave, he noticed a familiar figure approaching. It was Karen, her expression a mix of concern and annoyance. Jason, I've been looking all over for you. That truck of yours has been parked on the street for days, and it's driving the entire neighborhood crazy, she said, her voice laced with frustration. Jason took a deep breath, trying to keep his cool. Karen, I'm sorry, but I was just responding to an emergency call. You know how important my work is. Important? Karen scoffed. More like an excuse to do whatever you want. The rules apply to everyone, Jason, including you. Look, Karen, I understand your concerns, but this truck isn't just some personal vehicle. It's essential equipment for my job as a first responder. I can't just leave it parked at home when there's an emergency, Jason argued, his voice raised. Karen opened her mouth to retort, but a sudden commotion nearby caught their attention. A small crowd had gathered, and the sound of sirens filled the air. Jason's eyes widened as he recognized the flashing lights of a fire truck. Oh no, he muttered, sprinting towards the scene. Karen, her curiosity piqued, followed close behind, her expression a mix of confusion and apprehension. As they approached the area, Jason's heart sank. A house was on fire, and the flames were already consuming the upper floors. He knew he had to act quickly, but with Karen dogging his every step, he couldn't help but worry about the consequences of his next move. Jason surveyed the scene, his mind racing. The fire was rapidly spreading, and he knew that every second counted. Without hesitation, he sprinted to his truck, grabbed his gear, and began to sprint towards the burning house. Karen, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and indignation, called out after him. Jason, where do you think you're going? You can't just leave that truck here. Jason ignored her protests, his focus entirely on the task at hand. He reached the front door of the house and could hear the frantic cries of the occupants from within. Without a moment's hesitation, he charged into the building, his equipment at the ready. The smoke was thick and acrid, and the heat was stifling, but Jason pushed forward, searching for any sign of life. He could hear the crackle of the flames and the groaning of the structure as it began to weaken. Suddenly, he spotted a woman and 2 young children huddled in a corner, their faces etched with fear. This way! Jason shouted, guiding them towards the exit. The family clung to him, their lungs burning from the smoke. As they emerged from the house, Jason could see the relief on their faces. The fire department had arrived and was already working to extinguish the blaze. Handing the family over to the care of the paramedics, Jason turned to see Karen standing nearby, her expression a mix of awe and confusion. I don't understand, she stammered, her gaze fixed on the burning building. You just ran in there, without a second thought. Jason wiped the sweat from his brow, his breathing heavy. That's what I do, Karen. I'm a first responder. It's my job to put myself in harm's way to save lives. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again, seemingly at a loss for words. The fire chief approached them, his face etched with gratitude. Your quick action undoubtedly saved those people, son, he said, his voice gruff but sincere. We owe you a debt of gratitude. Karen's eyes widened, and she glanced back and forth between Jason and the fire chief, her expression slowly shifting from one of confusion to something resembling understanding. I had no idea, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought it was just a truck. Jason nodded, sensing an opportunity to bridge the gap. I know, Karen. But this truck and the equipment inside of it are what allow me to do my job and save lives. It's not just a vehicle, it's a lifeline. Karen fell silent, her gaze fixed on the smoldering remains of the house. For a long moment, Jason wondered if he had finally managed to get through to her, to help her see the true importance of his role as a first responder. As the fire was brought under control and the scene began to calm, Karen remained silent, lost in thought. Jason watched her carefully, wondering if his words had finally resonated with the stubborn HOA president. After a few moments, Karen turned to face him, her expression softened. I had no idea, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I always thought that truck was just some kind of personal vehicle, but now I see it's so much more than that. It's a tool that saves lives. Jason nodded, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. That's right, Karen. This truck and the equipment inside of it are essential to my work as a first responder. I can't just leave it parked at home when there's an emergency. Karen's gaze fell to the ground, and she let out a deep sigh. I've been so focused on the rules and regulations, I never stopped to consider the bigger picture. All I saw was an eyesore in my neighborhood, not the vital role it plays in keeping people safe. Jason placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, sensing an opportunity to bridge the divide. It's okay, Karen. I know the rules are important, but sometimes they need to be flexible, especially when it comes to matters of life and death. Karen's eyes met his, and for the first time, Jason saw a genuine hint of understanding in her expression. You're right, she said, her voice firm. I can't keep threatening to have your truck towed when it's so clearly essential to your work. From now on, I'll make sure the HOA understands the importance of what you do. Jason couldn't help but smile, relieved that his efforts to reason with Karen had finally paid off. Thank you, Karen. I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but I'm glad we were able to find a way to work together on this. Karen nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. I'm sorry I was so stubborn about this. I can be, well, a bit of a stickler for the rules sometimes. But I can see now that there are times when the rules need to be bent for the greater good. As they parted ways, Jason couldn't help but feel a sense of optimism about the future. Maybe, just maybe, his relationship with Karen and the HOA was finally starting to heal. With a renewed sense of purpose, he climbed back into his truck, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. In the days that followed, Jason noticed a shift in Karen's attitude towards him and his rescue truck. Gone were the angry confrontations and threats of towing. Instead, he found the HOA president to be more understanding and even willing to advocate on his behalf. During a neighborhood meeting, Karen stood up and addressed the concerned residents, many of whom had previously shared her frustrations about the unsightly vehicle parked on the street. "Friends, I know many of you have been upset about the rescue truck belonging to our resident, Jason," she began, her voice clear and confident. "But I want you all to understand just how important that truck is, not just to Jason, but to our entire community." The assembled residents murmured in confusion, some exchanging puzzled glances. Karen raised a hand, silencing the crowd. "Jason isn't just some guy with a big truck. He's a first responder, someone who puts his life on the line every day to keep